All right, there's three approaches to value. To arrive at an accurate assessment of worth, an appraiser often employs one or more of the following three fundamental valuation techniques: sales comparison, cost, and income approach. The three ways serve as checks against one another, and the use of many approaches enables an appraiser to narrow down the range of the final value determination. Each strategy is best effective with particular types of properties. So I'm going to explain that too. The first one is a sales comparison approach. Sales comparison approach. Now, almost all the property, and this is the most common use, so you guys know this one. Almost all the properties use the sales comparison approach, also known as market data approach. It also serves as a foundation for the brokerage value opinion, or even the CMAs. It is based on substitution principle, which states that a buyer will not pay more for a subject property than would be required to purchase a comparable property, like we said before, right? And the contribution principle, which states that a specific characteristics add value to the property. So the sales comparison approach uses pretty much, or bases itself based on these two principles: substitution and contribution. Now, the sales comparison approach is common because it considers a subject property specific amenities in comparison to competing properties. Also, due to the data being current, the approach comprises of current market realities. So because we're going to go over what's happening now, properties are now on the markets, right? It's best effective for that. We're not going to compare properties from today with properties that sold 10 years ago, different values. So it's one of the best approaches, depending on the type of property. Because each property is unique, the sales comparison approach is limited. As a result, finding good comparables is difficult, particularly for special purpose properties. It is also important that the market must be active, otherwise the sales prices are out of date and unreliable. I do apologize. I'm having difficulty both reading and speaking. It's the migraine speaking. So if I roll the tongue here and there, I'm sorry. I'll stop and say it again. You forgive me? Thank you. All right. So that makes sense, right? If it's not an active market, then the prices are not real. Like I said, you're not going to compare something that's happening today to something that happened 10 years ago, or even a year ago, or even 6 months ago. Because 6 months ago, market changed. So anything beyond 6 months, we cannot use anymore, right? The sales price of a comparable is adjusted to account for any differences in value between the subject and the comparable. And the following are elements of comparison for which adjustments must be made: property rights, financing concessions, market conditions, conditions of the sale, market conditions since the sale, preference for location or area, physical characteristics, and the amenity. So we already went over all of these, so I'm not going to go in detail, but property rights, you got to know who's entitled to sell, who's not, if there's a lease, if there's no lease, all that stuff. There's easements, that all affects, or encumbrances, that all affects the property. Financing concessions, we said about the arm's length transaction, about not any undue stress or anything like that, that affects the value. Market conditions, interest rates up and down, supply and demand, all that affects the value. We talked about the conditions of the sale, if it was a foreclosure, if it was a regular sale, and so on. Location, we talked about. Physical characteristics, we talk about. So we're going to go straight to this right here. Is taken out of an appraisal, so you have an idea. This is how it looks like, and you got to be able to read it. I'm not going to teach you or train you how to read that, because when you get on the field, that's what your broker will be for and your team leaders will be for. But I'm going to give you some lights about what we need to look at. Thanks, Jen. I appreciate it. Jen says she made some tacos she was going to share, but I took too long, so she ate them. And no, I was not too hungry. I just had a little piece of chocolate right now. I mean, chocolate tacos, chocolate taco, tacos, yeah. Chocolate. Yeah, I went with chocolate, but tacos would be great on top of the chocolate. So, just saying. Thanks, Jen. I thought you loved me. It's seriously unbelievable, right? These people. Alexander says chocolates are not great for my. It's what I found. I haven't been eating chocolates. I got to my office. It's what I found, my friend. But no, they're not good. No. Nadia says wine is. I'll think about it after class. Chocolate tacos. All right. Here's what you got to look at in an actual report. So the report will show you the features that there's a list of stuff that we compare to, right? It'll show you the subject property, which is the one you're trying to come up with a value. And it shows you comparables. 1, 2, 3. Usually there's 4 comparables. Obviously, to fit on the screen is going to be tough. So here we have the subject property, projected sale 565. That's what we're looking for. We're going to start from the end. Okay. This property sold for 550. This property sold for 492, and this property sold for 635. Okay, so we'll start from the end and go back. This property was 34 days on the market, 65 days on the market, 5 days on the market. These are things to consider. It was purchased with a conventional mortgage. Conventional mortgage. This was a VA mortgage. The type of sale does affect, as we said before, does affect the value. Now, take this out. Location. The property that we're looking at is in Valameda in this example. This one is in a different area. This one's in the same. This is a different area as well. Okay. So because of where it's located, look how we take $25,000. Now we're taking from this value because our property is in a worse location. Because this was in a better location, we take from it. Okay. If it was leaseholder fee simple, the site, so the lot is 17,000 square feet for the property we're looking at. Comparables are 16, 21, and 14. This one's residential parkland. Okay, and we take money out of it. Colonial style, like everything is here. Condition, average upgraded. 12 total rooms, 4 are bedrooms, 2.5 baths. Gross living area, GLA is 3,368 square feet. So let's look at comparables. 4 bedroom, 2.5, 4 bedroom, 2.5, 2,500 square feet, 2,600 square feet, 3,100 square feet, and so on. And the adjustments. These are the adjustments as we go. This is minus, these are plus, and so on. So everything is adjusted as we go. Functional utility, heating and cooling if he has, if he doesn't have. Again, I'm not going to teach you how to read this, but I want you to have an idea how it works. Is we're going to look at these differences. Like I was being asked before the break, there was a 3-bedroom, 1 bath, and the other one had 2, right? We're going to look at these differences and make these minor adjustments based on what it is. So this one has the patio. There's an adjustment in value, right? We have in-ground pool over here. There's no pool in these ones. So it changes value and so on. And then at the bottom, it says that to the value of this price sold for $550. To the value of this price, we added $21,000. To this one, we added $64,000. To this one, we took $11,000 minus. So now these are the adjusted comparable prices. And the average of these 3 is what will give the value to our property after these adjustments. Okay, so we're not going to find exact exact values. I'm sorry, properties are exactly like ours. So yes, we need to make these adjustments. All right. Any questions here? All these characteristics come into consideration. Talks even about the type of construction. I forgot to go over that. Vinyl, aluminum siding makes a difference. All the stuff, the type of insulation, if he has a garage or not, all these are adjusted. Thank you, Jim. So all these are adjusted. In this one, had a net adjustment of 3.9%, gross 13%, gross adjustment 13%, and so on. Variation of prices. All right, the next one we have is cost approach. Now, as the name says, cost approach, right? If you guys remember, we had cost, we had price and value, right? If we're talking about the cost approach, it's related to what? If we're talking about cost approach, it would be related to what? To the price? No. Michelle goes to the cost.
The past.
Nope. When we talked about the past, the cost being the past, what was it related to? Construction. So if we're talking about the cost approach, we're talking about construction. Construction cost. Okay, we're talking about construction cost. The cost approach is most often used for recently built properties where the actual cost of development and construction are known. It is also used for special purpose buildings which cannot be valued by the other methods because of lack of comparables or income. So if you look at special purpose buildings, schools, hospitals, and so on, there's no public buildings, there's no income to that, right? I mean, there is income for whoever is using it, but it's not a rental income, it's a usage income, it's different, it's a business income. So if there's no rental income, we cannot use the income approach, which is the next one we're going to learn. And if there's not enough sales, we cannot use the sales comparison approach. So we fall back on the cost approach. Now, the strengths of the cost approach are that it provides an upper limit for the subject's value based on undepreciated cost of reproducing the improvements. It is very accurate for property with new improvements, which are the highest and best use of the property. But there are limitations, obviously. And the cost to create improvements is not necessarily the same as market value. And depreciation is difficult to measure, especially for older buildings. So we need to figure out what would be best. Would it be a reproduction cost or a replacement cost? Okay. Now, the cost approach generally aims to estimate either the reproduction cost or replacement cost of the subject property. Reproduction cost is the cost of constructing at current prices a precise duplicate of the subject property. So reproduction is precise duplicate. So whatever material was used back in the day, whenever it was built, let's say 100 years ago, whatever material was used back then, if we were to use the same today at current prices, what it would be worth. Okay, so that's reproduction, is making the same as it was. Okay, where replacement cost is the cost of constructing at current prices as well, and using current materials and methods, a functional equivalent of the subject improvements. So replacement cost is by getting a functional equivalent. So for instance, we don't use copper pipes anymore. What do we use? We don't use copper pipes. What we use? PVC, for instance. Okay. Plastic and bonding pipes. That's all we use right now. Okay. So replacement cost means it serves the same function. To use PVC, it's the same function as the copper pipes, but it's cheaper and easier for labor purposes, right? So if you use copper, you need to be a welder, right? And copper is expensive. So that's the difference. Reproduction, we go back to the origins. Replacement is, think of it as aftermarket for your car. Like, yeah, Mercedes is a little expensive. Let me go to the 99 store and get something to put here that will do the same purpose. I'm kidding. Don't go to a 99-cent store to buy stuff for a Mercedes. Go to the dollar store at least, plus tax. Yes. All right, replacement cost is used primarily for appraising older structures, since it is impractical to consider reproducing outmoded features and materials. However, reproduction cost is preferable whenever possible because it facilitates the calculation of depreciation on a structure. So depreciation is, we're going to talk about better, but it's a loss of value over time. So replacement cost is like you're just putting something new, right? Reproduction is, all right, how much did it cost back then? Over these years, we know how much you lost in value, okay? To estimate reproduction or replacement costs, there are several methods. Real quick, I'm not going to go through all of them. There's a unit comparison method, there's a unit in place method, quantity survey, or cost index. The most common use are these two. So the unit comparison and the unit in place method. The unit comparison is the square foot method. That's what most builders use nowadays. So when you look at a property, oh, it has 1,000 square feet. Great. In the area, the average construction for the average property, not luxury, right, is $45 a square foot. As an example. For new construction, $150 a square foot, let's say. So you put $1,000 times 150, it's going to cost me $150,000 to build. If it's renovation, let's say it's $45 a square foot, and it's going to cost me $45,000 to rehab this property. Does that make sense? Like, these numbers are not 100% accurate, obviously. I'm just throwing numbers out there for you to have an idea, right? But the square foot method is the most commonly used nowadays. The unit in place method, right, is where we use the material cost, the individual material costs, to figure out the value. See, in this one, the square foot method, it's like I'm not looking at individual costs. It's an average. That's how much it costs to build. Boom, let's go, right? Unit in place method, we're now looking at the cost of material individually. Okay.
So the unit in place
Well, actually, quantity survey method would be the most accurate one. Yeah, but we're not going to go over that one. But these are the two most common. So after you know this one, let's say it's the first house being built in the area, we use one of these two. If it's the first house being built. After we build 2 or 3 properties, we know more or less how much it's going to cost now. So we move up to this one. Okay. Like comps. Properties like this were built based on X amount of dollars per square foot. All right, depreciation. We need to talk about depreciation at 2 levels. There's a depreciation for what we're talking about now, appraisals, and there's depreciation for tax purposes. There's a big difference between these. Okay. Depreciation in real estate appraisal is a loss of value for any reason that diminishes the value of real estate improvements. Land by itself is not depreciating asset. That's both in real estate and for tax purposes. It holds its value indefinitely, except for rezones, urban parcels, badly developed land, and misused agriculture. Now, depreciation for the purposes of an appraisal is distinct from depreciation for tax reporting. For appraisal purposes, depreciation is the actual loss in value. For appraisal purposes, depreciation is the actual loss in value caused by deterioration, damage, and obsolescence. I'm going to go over the word obsolescence in a little bit because you have to know the word, unfortunately. For tax purposes, depreciation or cost recovery is an annual deduction from taxable income. So that's the biggest difference between these two. Depreciation for appraisal purposes is the actual loss in value. Like you drive the car off the lot, you lost $5,000. That's an actual loss in value right there and then. What you can use to depreciate when you go to do your taxes is different. is based on the usage over several times, a big period of time, right? So it's based on usage for tax purposes. Depending on whether it can be corrected economically, depreciation is either curable or incurable. For purposes of appraisal, depreciation is separated into three classes based on cause. We have physical deterioration, we have functional obsolescence, and we have economic obsolescence. I'll show you an easy way to remember this in a second, because you have to remember it. There will be questions, guaranteed or your money back. Okay. Not that you'll remember when you get there, but I'm putting the guarantee. It's like almost all the guarantees. They bet on you not remembering stuff. Did you ever buy a course online? It's just a PDF, something like that. And it says, or even a product. You go to Walmart or wherever, it says, "Oh, money back guarantee if this does not work." Right? You got 60 days to claim it. You never open the damn thing. So there goes your 60-day window. How many times you buy stuff that comes with a guarantee and you bought it maybe because of the guarantee, but you never use it? Anybody? You raise your hand. I'll raise my both hands. I'm a fiend for educational products. So I'm always buying educational stuff. I got so many courses that I haven't even started yet, but I have them because at the time that I bought them, there was a discount going on, and I said I'm going to learn about it anyway. Might as well buy it now, right? Some of them they put offers like oh, lifetime, whatever, pay this, so you pay more, but I have lifetime access to the course. Whenever it's upgraded or anything, I don't have to pay again, right? But I never started it. Some of them are like 10 years old. Anyway, Jennifer says, "Me too. I have them online." Here you go. I have them online. I have them offline. I have them on the sidelines. Anyway, hopefully, you guys will do like I did. I decided to focus on one thing. So I have the courses, but I focused on one thing, and that's why I advocate for everybody. Focus on what you're doing now. Pass this, then get into another course. Pass that, get into another course. And try to do all of them at once. Okay? You already know how that goes when you go to school, right? Like when you used to go to college and stuff, like too many things to worry about, and then the final exams. Here's just one. You have to worry about one exam. Study for one thing, right? And as soon as you pass, you put it to practice right away, right? That's it. Focus. Elvis says it's Udemy for me. I got courses there, and I got courses in the course.com, and I got courses in study.com, and I got courses in whatever.com. You don't know how much money I've spent in courses over the past 17 years. Anyway. So physical deterioration, keyword physical. That's what we're going to focus on a little bit. A curable item is one that, if repaired, would result in an increase in value equal to or greater than its cost, such as repainting. For example, if a paint job costs $6,000 and the resulting value increases $8,000, then the deterioration is considered curable. An item that is incurable is the opposite. So the repair will cost more than can be recovered by its contribution to the value of the building. For example, if the paint job costs $10,000, the deterioration could be considered incurable. All right. So because the value increase is only 8, if it doesn't increase enough value, it's not worth it. Then we have functional obsolescence. We'll go back to this word in a little bit, but let's go to obsolescence. Obsolescence refers to a decline in value caused by market reaction to what? To a product. Now, functional obsolescence occurs when the property has outmoded physical or design features. Outmoded physical or design features which are no longer desirable to current users. If the obsolescence is curable, the cost of replacing or redesigning the outmoded feature would be offset by the contribution to the overall value. For example, a lack of central air conditioning. If you put central air, what happens to the value? Goes up. But if the functional obsolescence is incurable, the cost of the cure would exceed the contribution to the overall value. For example, a floor layout with bad traffic pattern would cost 3 times as much as the ending contribution to value. Okay, I underlined this for a reason. I'll explain that in a second. So the floor layout with a bad traffic pattern would cause to be incurable value, right? And then we have external obsolescence. If the property depreciation is induced by external sources, such as environmental, social, or economic forces, it's always irreversible. Economic or external obsolescence is the loss of value due to adverse changes in the surroundings of the subject property that make the subject less desirable. Since such changes are usually beyond control of the property owner, economic obsolescence is considered an incurable value loss. Examples of economic obsolescence include deteriorating neighborhood, rezoning of adjacent properties, or the bankruptcy of a large employer. All right, let's look at these three. We have physical, functional, external. If you don't remember the rest of it, it doesn't matter. There's physical deterioration, functional obsolescence or loss of value, and there's external obsolescence. If you don't remember obsolescence word, if you don't remember deterioration word, it does not matter. What you need to know is physical, functional, and external. Okay? Physical. If there's physical damage and we can fix it, okay, so physical has to do with repairs. If we can fix it, good. If you cannot fix it, no good. But it doesn't matter. It's about repairs. Physical is about repairs. Okay? Functional is about use. Functional is about use. Can we use it? Is it usable? Is it worth it? Right? So for instance, if I have, let's say in this, you guys cannot see it, but you guys can, right? You guys at home cannot see it, but in this classroom, there's a column right there. I cannot move that support column. Because I cannot move it, I lose one seat in the back. So the value of this school space has decreased because of that, because I sit one less person. Does that make sense? So the when I highlighted here the floor layouts with bad traffic pattern is, this is not a rectangle, this is not a square. This is the odd shaped room. Thank you. Sorry. I'm really trying. It's an odd shaped room over here with a column, not in the middle, but there's a column that stops me from having an optimal layout. All right. So remember that, because there might be a question, there may not be a question in the state exam or school exam that involves support columns and the layout. So the floor layout is the answer. Anyway, so that's functional, right? I cannot repair it because it's not a damaged thing, right? The column is not a damaged thing. I cannot repair it, right? It's just there. It's a nuisance. Does that make sense? So if I could move it, it would be curable. And then there's external. External, it's always incurable, always something outside of your property. So when you look at the answers, if you're talking about external obsolescence, right, or loss of value, if you're talking about that, look for answers that talk about something outside. So sometimes the question could be, oh, all of these are examples of external obsolescence except, right? And they talked about the gas station down the street. They'll talk about McDonald's. They'll talk about the school, and then they'll talk about the oil tank in your backyard. Which one of these is not an external obsolescence? Oil tank. Okay. Now, the other word you need to remember for external is this one. It's economic. If it's economic, it has nothing to do with your property. So economic and external are the same. Economic or external are the same. Outside forces. That's what you got to remember. Outside forces. Economic conditions or external conditions. Outside forces. So if it's a physical deterioration, look for something that talks about repairs or maintenance. If it's functional, can I change the use? Like a dining room. If we're a family of 6 right now, right? And my kids went to college, right? If it's just me and the wife, do you need a dining room? Let's eat in the kitchen. Actually, even now with all the kids, it's usually the kitchen. But I'm just saying, let's eat in the kitchen. We don't need a dining room. So what can we turn the dining room into? You can turn it into something else. We can use it for something else. The purpose has changed. Does that make sense? Right? So that's what functional will be. And then external or economic obsolescence, it's always incurable and it's always outside of your property. Good? Give me thumbs up. I got thumbs up here. I got thumbs up there. Good. Thumbs up everywhere. The straight line technique, commonly known as economic age life method, is the easiest but least precise way to calculate depreciation. Is your brother having an emergency? Seriously. All right. It is thought that depreciation occurs in a constant rate across the structure's economic life, or the period during which it is expected to serve its original purpose. The annual depreciation is calculated by dividing, might be a question in the exam or not, but what you do is you divide the property's cost by the number of years anticipated for its economic life. For instance, if you have a roof and it costs you $15,000 and they give you a 30-year guarantee, what do? $15,000 divided by 30 years. And that's how much you lose every year in value. That's why it's called a straight line. It's not the most effective way to calculate it, but it is the easiest one. So every year, 15 divided by 30, every year I'm going to lose X amount of dollars in value. Okay. That's what it says. All right. The cost approach consists of 5 steps. You estimate the land value, estimate the reproduction or replacement costs of improvements. You estimate accrued depreciation. Then you subtract accrued depreciation from reproduction or replacement costs. And then you add land value to depreciated reproduction or replacement costs. So let's look at this in numbers, be a lot easier, right? So you have here, the next page, you have an illustration and it says step number 1, step number 2, step number 3, step number 4 and 5. So what we do first is we calculate the land value by itself because land does not depreciate. We said that, right? So land by itself. In this case, the size 60 by 135 at 450 per front foot plus side improvements, driveway, walk landscaping, and so on. So the value is $27,000 plus the $10,000 of additions, and we got $30,000 land value, right? That's land value. The next thing we're going to look at is the building valuation by looking at the replacement or the reproduction cost. In this case, we're using the replacement cost of 2,500 square feet at $75 per square foot. So to replace this building, to build a new one, $187,500 to build a new one. But we need to look at the bad things of the property. That's called depreciation. Remember? Physical, right? We have physical, functional, external. Is it curable? So items of deferred maintenance, like exterior painting here, $4,000. Incurable, so structural deterioration, whatever it might be, $9,750. So we have to take $13,000 from the 187 to reach the building value. Again, why do we have to do this? Because the cost to build new 187, but there's things we cannot do right now with the property. And we're estimating, we're not knocking down the building, we're just estimating. So how do we estimate? We got to look at the current condition. So there's $13,000 worth of repairs that we cannot do or can do depending on whether they're curable or incurable, and we have to deduct. So that's step number 4. The depreciated value of the building is 173,750. So we're going to add the numbers on the right, the $37,000. Okay, we're going to add these two right here. And that means that our property is worth $210,750. That's the property value. It's not that hard when we look at numbers, right? What, it was difficult? Oh. So these are the steps. Again, land by itself, then the building using reproduction or replacement cost. We deduct the depreciation from the building, and then we add the value of both. Okay. Thumbs up before I go to the next one. Questions before I go to the next one? No? All right. So hold on. Where did I get $10,000 in the first step? So it was 27,000. That was the land value. But then there's improvements to the raw land. Okay, so this is raw. If he had no improvements, how much would it be worth? But because he has a driveway, walkway, landscaping, and all that stuff, it's worth $10,000 more. Everything is based on comparables. So just like I showed you the appraisal report before, and that property is better and this property is worse and whatever, we make those adjustments. Now, guys, remember, we're not appraisers, so this is not for us. It's good for you to be able to look at it. Like I said, buried in an appraisal report the other day, the rentals were offset by the appraiser's opinion. So you have to look at it and be like, oh, wait a minute, just like Lila did right now. Hey, what's that $10,000? Where did that come from? Right? What if it said negative $10,000? Where did that come from? Right? So we need to be able to identify and say, hey, appraiser, what's wrong with you? Were you having a migraine the day we did this? All right. But it's 5 easy steps, as I just showed you. Obviously, if you're looking at the paper, it's a lot easier than me going back and forth here. Can get a little confusing, but if you're looking at the overall like this, the steps are exactly what you see. Okay, very easy. All right, the complicated ones. These were the easy ones. The sales comps and the cost approach, the easy ones. Complicated one. There's a lot of confusion about the income approach. Here's what I got to say before we even start. As a new licensee, okay, this does not matter to you. Unless you go straight to commercial buildings. Then the income is very important for you. Because most new licensees go straight into residential markets, right? Which is 1 to 4 families. Because you go straight into residential properties, we don't use not even the cost approach. It's a sales comparable. That's the one you need to focus on. Okay. If you're gonna go work in commercial buildings, commercial property, rental apartment units, and all that stuff, like 5 units or more, then you need to know these. You got it? But for state exam purposes, you need to know the basics. There's 2 ways to calculate what I'm going to say here. There's 2 ways to calculate or numbers that we need, which is the interest and the exit numbers. I will not teach you that because, again, you're not going to commercial, right? But if you were, you'd need to be able to tell the potential buyer, hey, here's your interest and here's your exit values, okay? Which is called cap rates, capitalization rates. It's talks about the return of your money, okay? Now, the income capitalization approach or income approach is used for income properties and sometimes for other properties in the rental market where the appraiser can find rental data. The approach is based on the principle of anticipation, which is expectation of future income stream. We already talked about it. Underlies what the investor will pay for the property. It is also based on the principle of substitution that an investor will pay no more for a subject property with a certain income stream than an investor would pay for another property with a similar income stream. So every one of these approaches has their own elements where they're based, or fundamentals of value where they're based on. So the previous one, we had substitution and contribution, right? Here is a substitution, right? And anticipation. All right. The strength of the income approach is that it's used by investors themselves to determine how much they should pay for the property. Thus, in the right circumstances, it provides a good basis for estimating market value. The income capitalization approach is limited in two ways. First, it is difficult to determine an appropriate capitalization rate. I'll explain that in a second. And this is often a matter of judgment and experience on the part of the appraiser. Secondly, the income approach relies on market information about income and expenses, and it can be difficult to find such information. So why is it difficult? Why does it limit you? Why can't we find this stuff? The majority of the times, the problem is you guys. So realtors, we are lazy by nature. We want to make the big bucks, but we don't want to work for it. Okay? I'm telling you the reality. When you go look at the listing, right? When you go look at the listing, and let me see if I can pull one up real quick. Go through this again. Sucks, right? It's fun to watch me do this.
No, I'm saying
Ah.
how much fun for you to just do it.
Fun for me to do. What do you mean?
I'm being sarcastic, right?
Oh,
Super sarcastic.
today's not the day.
Yeah, I can tell.
All right, so let's look at commercial properties. Essex, we are in Newark. Search. So any. We got 80 commercial properties being sold. Mixed use, mixed use, mixed use. Let's look at this one. All right, so this is, Jennifer says it happens to the best. Hey, I know. This is in the Ironbound. It's an apartment complex with 5 units, so it's a 5-family. Okay. Now, when you look at it, there's remarks, explain all that stuff. This is very important. Look, listing agent related to the seller and one of the sellers on hold. Active New Jersey real estate license. Okay. It gives you all the details of the property, whatever, whatnot. But then we go down here and it says the taxes, and it says GOI. Well, I cannot write on this, but it says GOI right here. You guys can see. It says cap rates. It's not $5, it's 5%. Okay. It tells you what the expenses include. Okay. These are the expenses and the NOI. So the NOI is supposed to be, we're going to go over this, supposed to be this 84,000 minus this 26,000, supposed to be 57. Okay. Now, if we look at 57, let's go here, a calculator. I'm going to go over the math real quick and I'm going to explain anyway. Let's say 57,000. And they said the cap rate is 5%. This property is worth 1.14. Just by looking at it with these numbers that they provide is 1.14. Okay. How much are they're asking for? 1.15. So I wasn't far off. right? This might be a real number, might not be a real number. It all depends on two items. Mm-mm. The cap rate is one of the most important ones. The location is coming next to what I'm going to say. The cap rate and obviously the NOI. These are the two most important numbers that we need when calculating this. Cap rate and NOI. The cap rate right here is a number that the realtor feels to be the correct number. So you should never trust this number ever and go look at other properties in the area. This one, yep. Can you see what the problem is? Yep. Nothing. But it appears to be land only, so I guess that's what's being sold. Even though it says 5 units, maybe new construction, I don't know. Let's look at this one. No cap rate, no NOI, because they don't know how to calculate the NOI, which is this one minus this one. And so on. What else? Like, I'm trying to make comparables here, so I can figure out what my cap rate is, or what the actual value might be. Look. Nothing. And there is a building, so lazy realtor. Okay, incredible opportunity. Well, give me more info. Another one. DJ Khaled. There's a building. Look at that. 38 units. There's 28 one bedrooms here. Oh, it's a rooming house. Okay. It's 28 rooms. It's a rooming house. So it's not, it's pretty much is a bunch of rooms that share on each floor, they share amenities.
Okay.
That's why it looks like
Like a door.
pretty much. All right, another one. At least I got some info as far as expenses, but still does not tell me what the cap rate is. Now, that's the challenge that we get with the income approach. If you don't deal with this on a daily, you have no idea what the cap rate is for a particular area, for a particular type of property. Okay, I'll explain cap rate in a second, but these are the two things that we look at. It's the NOI and the cap rate. If we don't have those to compare, it's difficult. So we rely on that data. Net operating income. I'm going to go over all that. All right. So the income approach based on anticipation is used to value properties that generate income, such as apartment buildings, office buildings, historic sites, and shopping mall. Anything that generates income. These are the following steps to estimate using the income approach. So number one, we're going to estimate the property's annual potential gross income, PGI, annual potential gross income. An estimate of economic rental income must be based on market studies. The current rental income may not reflect the current market rental rates. We know that. If somebody's been living there for 10 years, they're probably paying below market rates. So not only do we look at the data that I just showed you, I need to have an idea of what the market value is for this type of property, okay? And that will be the potential rental income if it was fully occupied at current market rates, okay? Especially in the case of short-term leases or leases about to terminate. Potential income also includes income to the property, such as sources as vending machines, parking fees, laundry machines. These are not part of rental. These are parking rental is not part of housing rental. Okay, so these are extras in our calculations. All right. So vending machines, parking fees, and laundry. We add this to the potential income. Step number two. You have to think about it. If there's income, there has to be expenses. The deductions, right? We never profit fully. You have a paycheck, there's a gross income, there's a net income. So the deduction in this case is vacancy and rent loss. In this case, the immediate deduction is vacancy and rent loss. Are we going to be 100% occupied? Hopefully. Is there a possibility that one of the units will be vacant for a month or 2 or 3? Yes. Is there a possibility that a tenant will not pay the rent for a month or 2 or 3? Yes. So based on our experience in this type of property, in this type of area, what is the expected loss? Could be 5%, could be 20%, or if it's a motel or hotel, it could be as much as 50%. Okay? Because we average out for the year. There's hot seasons, there's cold seasons in terms of occupancy, right? So we average out throughout the year what those are. For hotels, 50%. Yeah, and they still make money. Imagine when it's when it's less than that. And we arrive at the next number that we need is the effective gross income. So this is what we wish we would get, potential gross income. This is what we can really count on. To make this number more real to you, think of it as, again, we go back to your paycheck. Your paycheck is based on you working all the days, right? Is it possible that you miss a couple of days? Okay. Now, they do implement PTOs and all that stuff, but let's assume that you don't have any of those, okay? Because PTOs are paid time off, right? Let's assume you don't have any of those or you go beyond those. Do you get paid the same amount as if you had them or if you work the whole year? No, because you miss days. Like if you work in the restaurant business, I can tell you right now, you don't show up, you don't get paid. Simple, right? So there is, let's call that the vacancy or rent collection losses, not showing up to work. But there's the expense to go to work. Gas, tolls, parking, clothes, whatever. So that's the operating expenses. That's different from these losses. That's the operating expenses. We need to deduct the operating expenses. Okay. And this is to arrive at the number that we actually need for calculations, which is called the NOI. And NOI is net operating income. Did you make it follow me? Net operating income. So I wish it was 100% occupied, but I got to account for not showing up to work, right? So the vacancies, right? Then I got the expenses, and this is the number I take home. This number, very important. Management costs are always included, even if the current owner manages the property. But mortgage payments are debt service and are not considered operating costs. Why are these not considered operating costs or expenses? Why are mortgage payments not considered? Because electricity will always be there as a payment. Taxes will always be there as a payment. Water will always be there as a payment. Maintenance will always be there as a payment. But mortgage, I can pay it off, right? So that's why it's not considered in this calculation. You have to remember that because the question in the school or state exam could say that the income is $100,000 with 5% collection loss, with $37,000 worth of expenses, right? And $2,000 a month mortgage payments, with a cap rate of 7%. What would be the value of the property? A lot of you will try to calculate all the deductions, including mortgage. Debt payment, this debt service, is not included because we're not always in debt unless you choose to refinance. You got it? All the other costs are costs of keeping the lights on, cost of business, operating expenses. So those are fixed expenses that we account for. Once you're done with that, you reach the NOI. We're going to estimate the difficult thing that I just showed you on the MLS. We're going to estimate what is the typical price that an investor would pay for the income produced by this particular type and class of property. This is done by estimating the rate of return that an investor will demand for the investment of capital in this building. This rate of return is called capitalization rate or cap rate. You guys remember I showed you this number before on the MLS? It said GOI and then it said cap rate right underneath. Okay. And it wasn't there? That's the one. Okay. The one that wasn't there. So I'm going to show you how to revert the calculations on that. Okay. They didn't tell us because again, realtors, we're lazy. We don't want to put all the info, but I'm going to show you how to get the info. So capitalization or cap rate. Now, and this is determined by comparing the relationship of the net operating income and the sales price of similar properties that have sold in the current market. This is also called, very important you guys know this, not for state exam, by the way, but important that you know when you talk about capitalization rate. A lot of people think that this is ROI, return on investment. It's not. The cap rate, that 5% cap rate, that 7% cap rate, that 10% cap rate, what would you like it to be? A higher number or a lower number? Higher number? A higher number, it's a bigger stress on the property. So it's actually worth less. The lower the number, the more it's worth. Because the direct capitalization method or the cap rate is how much money am I getting back every year? How much net money I'm getting back every year on my investments? Yeah. That means that the stress that he has versus the value of the property has to be low stress. So if there's too many expenses, that number increases to 10%, to 12%. If there's not as many expenses, then it decreases. Okay. I'm going to show you that too, but direct capitalization method as it determines the property's value based on income in 1 year span. It assumes that both costs and income will remain the same from year to year. Because of this assumption, it is most suitable for properties that generate consistent income from year to year. It is not a return on investment or ROI. Because return on investment has to do with yield. How much is it yielding a property? That's actual profit. This is not profit. This is getting the money back. How fast am I paying this property? My investment, I mean. So for example, a comparable property that's producing an annual income of $15,000 is sold for $187,500. The capitalization rate is 15,000 divided by that. So you know those properties that I showed you that did not have the cap rates? All the lazy realtor had to do is there's an NOI, which we saw, divide that by what you're trying to sell, and that's your cap rate. So NOI, we saw that number, listing price, right? Because that's what we assume to be the property value at this point. Cap rate is 8%. If that's not what it's worth, that's a different story. But that's how we calculate it.
Cap rate equals NOI divided by property price.
Yeah. If other comparable properties sold at prices that yielded substantially the same rate, it may be concluded that 8% is the rate that we want in this area for this type of property. Okay. So now that we figure out that it's 8%, remember I was trying to figure out if it was that 5%, the first one we saw, right? If I look at the other comparable properties, 5 units or 10 units or whatever, but all residential, that's the thing about income properties. We don't need to have the same amount of units like a sales comparison. What we need to have is the same type of property. So you're not going to compare a 5 units to an income producing strip mall that has 5 commercial retail properties, right? Retailers. It's different values. We need to compare residential rentals, 5 units or more, but residential rental, to another 5 unit or more with residential rental in the same area. Whatever is the net income of that property, divide by the sales price, gives me the cap rate. I'm going to take that cap rate, that's step number 5 in the last step, Gonna take that cap rate, look at my property brings $20,000 net. What do? I'm gonna apply the cap rate to that, right? To arrive at the estimate of property's value. So let's look at actual numbers, have a better idea of what I'm talking about. Okay. It's always better when we can visualize it, right? If I could make this whole thing like a movie, I would. That'd be nice, right? One day, who knows? Maybe if Jen keeps helping me and, teaching for me, I can focus on getting the production done in the background.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's always saying she wants to take over, so I'm like, go ahead, do it. And I can focus on the development of the course. Movies. She's quiet. Too quiet. She's getting a turkey. All right, so income capitalization approach to value. I told you that we start with the potential gross annual income, right? That's market rent at 100% capacity. We also add income derived from other sources like vending machines, pay phones, whatever. So fully rented, $60,000 plus additional income, $600. If it was 100% occupied and bringing the same income every year, we would look at 60,600, right, as income. Now we have to deduct. Forgot to put the numbers here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Step number 5. Okay. So now we have to figure out. We reach the effective gross income. Sorry. Less vacancy and collection losses, which in this case is estimated at 4% based on our experience of this property in this area. So we take 2,250 for the losses, 2,424 for the losses. That means what I can expect is 58,176 every year. That's the number I can count on every year. We deduct the expenses, real estate taxes, $9,000, insurance $1,000, heat, 2,500, maintenance, 6,400, and so on and so forth, until we reach the total of $27,000 in operating expenses, right? $27,000 in operating expenses. So how much money do I really bring in? What's my NOI? Which is 31,176. This is the clean money that I get if I have no mortgage. Okay, we don't account for the mortgage in this calculation, but that's the clean money that I'll get. That's my NOI, and that's the number that's most important. Next is the capitalization rate. We found out that 10% was the capitalization rate for this type of property. So the capitalized net income is based on 31,176 divided by 10%. This property is worth 311,760. It gives me $31,000 clean every year. It's worth 311,000 in this case. Okay. Now, with the appropriate capitalization rate and accurate projected annual net income, the appraiser can obtain an estimated value by applying the income approach. All right. This formula and its variations are important with dealing with income property. I'll show you this in math again, but we have income divided by rate equals value. Income divided by value equals rate, and then value times rate equals income. For example, net operating income or NOI divided by cap rate equals value, right? So this property has $18,000 worth of income. If we apply a 9% cap rate, the property is worth $200,000. If I apply an 8% cap rate, the property is worth $225,000. Look at that. A lesser percentage, higher value. So note the relationship between the rate and the value. As the rate goes down, the value increases. A higher cap rate or rate of return is required for an investment that has more risk, bringing down the cost of that investment. An investor will pay for more for an investment that poses less risk. Okay, so the lower the cap rate, and this is the funniest thing because I used to have realtors that I used to deal with as an investor. This has a really great cap rate. It's like a 10% cap rate. I'm like, okay. Do you have anything with less? I'm like, no, this one's really good. It's a high cap rate. Because you're thinking of rate of return or ROI, return on investment. Okay. So divided by 9%. Yes. So one of the things that you need to understand, and again, I'm not going to go over in detail because for state exam, sure, because it's state exam. What do you mean still equals 2,000? No, divide by 8%. One is 9%, the other one's 8%. A lesser cap rate. Are you saying divided by 9 or by 9% gives you the same? That's what you're saying? What kind of calculator do you have? So 18,000 divided by 0.09, 200,000. Or 18,000 divided by 9%, 200,000. You missed one step somewhere. It's okay. It happens. I thought you were going to say it's the calculator on your phone, and I was going to say, well, if it's an iPhone, that happens. And not because I'm hating on iPhones, but there you need to go an extra step on the iPhone doing your calculations, unfortunately. All right. Next. Any questions on the income approach so far? Are we good? Yes. I have a video on YouTube as well, just on the income approach. If you want to look at it, it's solely focused on this. I'm almost guaranteeing you're going to have a math question on the income approach. That's why I'm focusing on it. That's why I sped up on the other one so I can focus on this one. But again, you have a video on that with examples, questions, and all that stuff. All right. The next thing we have is gross rent or gross income multiplier. Now, the gross rent multiplier or gross income multiplier approaches are simplified income-based methods used primarily for properties that produce or might produce income, but are not primarily income properties. Okay. So this is when we go to residential. The income approach is used for 5 units or more or commercial properties, right? Okay. When you go to residential, if there's not enough comps around to look at to estimate value, then we're going to look at the rent income. Okay. So if it's a single family, a duplex, triplex, or even fourplex, we can use this. They're not primarily income properties because that's where you live, right? But they generate income. So if you cannot find comps, this is one of the things you would use. The methods consist of applying a multiplier to the estimated gross or gross rent of the subject. The multiplier is derived from market data on the sales price and gross income or gross rent. So if we go back to the, I think I already closed it. If we go back to the MLS, and you look for a two-family or three-family or four, it says rental on the first floor, second floor, and so on. So based on their rental income, if you, again, use that rental income against the value, it gives you what's called a GRM, gross rent multiplier. So again, we're looking at rents or income to attribute the value. The advantage of the income multiplier is that it offers relatively quick indication of value using informal methodology. However, the approach leaves many variables out of consideration, such as vacancies, credit losses, operating expenses. As the name says, let me go back up. As the name says, it's gross rent or gross income, right? That means it's not net. That means we're not deducting again for losses or expenses. In addition, the appraiser must have market rental data to establish the multipliers. The steps in the gross rent multiplier approach, there are two steps. First, you select the gross rent multiplier by examining the sales price and monthly rents of comparable properties. We already said that. Obviously, that's sold recently. The appraiser's judgment and market knowledge are critical in determining the appropriate gross rent multiplier for the subject. But the gross rent multiplier for the property is the price divided by monthly rent equals GRM. Price divided by monthly rent equals GRM. So we're going to look at properties that sold for $200,000, how much income they were bringing, divide that. That gives a GRM, similar to a cap rate, meaning it's the number that we're going to identify to use on our property. Okay. So the second thing we're going to do, so that was first. Second thing we're going to do is estimate the value of the subject property by multiplying the selected GRM to the subject income property. So GRM times our property's monthly rent equals estimated value. Let's look at it real quick. This is our property right here at the bottom. What we're going to do is we're going to look at property A, B, C, and D, see how much he sold for. This one sold for $250. It was bringing $1,600 a month. The GRM is $151. Property B sold for $247,500, and it was bringing $1,500 a month. The GRM $165. Property C, it was bringing $324,000. The rent is $2,200, GRM $147, and so on, right? So now that we found the 4 GRMs, we're going to add them and divide by the amount of comps. We had 4 comps, so we add all of them, 151 plus 165 plus 147 plus 169, that's 632. That's the total. Step number 2, we divide this by the amount of comps, and the GRM, except the GRM, is 158. So what do we do now that we have a GRM? We apply to our property. Okay. So we have GRM times the 2,000. Let me clear this out now. Times the 2,000. How much is our property worth? $316,000. Okay. So we looked at comps. We find out their GRM. We figure out the average GRM in the area based on those comps. We apply to our property. That's the value. Just like the cap rates. We're going to figure out the cap rate for all that. It could be a single family, it could be a duplex, a triplex, or fourplex.
You're gonna need two grades, so two properties gonna be price.
No. A duplex means it's a two-family. Okay. So no, because there's different terms for duplex. A duplex could be a single family here and a single family here, right? So we're calling duplex right now to a two-family where you get two rental income from the property. Okay, it could be side by side. It's called duplex, or up and down. Okay.
So then for the monthly rate, you would just add it.
Yeah, you would add whatever the total is. Yes. Okay. So if the property's income also comes from non-rental sources such as sales concessions, A gross income multiplier, so GIM, is used, similarly used. So let's say you had, you rent the parking space and you have vending machines, or you have the laundromat, right? You always have those machine coin operated machines, right? That income is added to the rent, and everything else is the same. Okay. Now, what do we do next? We found the three approaches to value. Some are applicable, some are easy, some are not as easy to figure out depending on the type of property. But once you have the three reports, one of the things we do is reconcile. What does it mean to reconcile? That's a relationship. What does it mean to reconcile? It's the same concept, but make it simpler. We split, and now we put back together. So reconciling is bringing together, yes, Shakir, bringing it together. So we have three approaches. Now we're going to examine all three to come up with one value. So when the three approaches to value are applied to the same property, they normally produce three separate indications of value. Reconciliation is the act of analyzing and effectively weighing the findings from the three approaches. In reconciliation, an appraiser explains not only the appropriateness of each approach, but also the relative reliability of the data within each approach in line with the type of value sought. The appraiser should also explain how the data reflect on the current market, and the process of reconciliation is not simply by taking the average of the three estimates of value. An average implies that the data and logic applied to each of the approaches are equally valid and reliable and should be given equal weight. In fact, however, certain approaches are more valid and reliable with some kinds of property than with others. For example, in appraising a home, the income approach will be appropriate only if there is a sufficient number of rental properties in the area. The cost approach is of limited value unless the home is relatively new. And as a result, the sales comparison approach is usually given the greatest weight in valuing single family. So the sales comparison approach is best for residential property. In appraisal of income or investment property, the income approach is normally given for income property the greatest weight. And in the appraisal of churches, libraries, museums, and schools and other special use properties where there's little or no income, right? The cost approach is usually assigned the greatest weight. You need to know that because there will be questions in the school or state exam of which one of these will be the most appropriate for this type of scenario. So if they say church, there's not income, well, debatable, right? There's no income, there's not many church sales. So which one is the best? Cost approach, right? If it's a three-family, which one is the best approach? Sales comparison approach. If it's a commercial property or apartment building with 10 units, income approach, right? From this analysis or reconciliation, a single opinion market is produced. So they'll put different weights on the values based on the type of property it is.